I can notice a TV 50 feet away in the corner of a restaurant, and within a few moments, I can know exactly what the score is. I cannot, however, notice when my wife gets her hair cut without her saying, do you notice anything different? Oh, yeah. For some reason, I can notice the minute I pull up in my friend's driveway that he has just mowed his yard. I cannot, however, notice a 1-year-old granddaughter teetering on the top step of a staircase. Run! Ah. I can somehow notice in the woods, 800 yards away, a buck coming at me. I cannot, however, notice where the ketchup bottle is in the refrigerator without my wife pointing it out 3 times. How do you explain that? Don't even try to explain that. There are things that sometimes just go unnoticed. When I'm reading through Scripture, I've read the Bible cover to cover many times, and still to this day, I can be reading along and something jumps out at me that it's as if I had never noticed it before. Today's going to be one of those days. Why does it go unnoticed? Because sometimes it appears as if it's insignificant information. And yet, when you go into the Bible, there's nothing in there that's insignificant. God has it all there for a reason. And even though you may not notice it the first time or the second time or the 100th time, there's going to come a day when a passage is going to jump out at you and it's going to stop you in your tracks. Today is another one of those days for me. What do I mean about insignificant passages or passages that appear insignificant? It was last summer we preached through Genesis, and as we were doing so, in Genesis chapter 1, there's this little passage here about God creating the sun and the moon. And then there's these 5 little words. He also made the stars. Now, I've read through that over and over, but somehow last year it stopped me in my tracks. How can something so big, so significant, just be mentioned with 5 words? It is surprising to me that that's all it says about the stars. We know today there's 1 billion galaxies. We know today there's a quintillion stars out there. When King David looked up and saw the starry sky at night with his limited vision of only what he could see, he found every reason in the world to worship God. And it's all through the Psalms. However, today you and I, because of the Hubble telescope, can see so much more and so much further than David ever could. And today people find less and less reasons to worship God. And that's just shocking to me. And here's this little verse that can seem so insignificant, 5 little words that can feel as if they're not that important until you allow your imagination to picture the last time you saw that starry sky. And you just paused for a moment and gave God credit for it. He even made the stars. Another one of those passages that didn't mean a lot to me for years is found in the feeding of the 5,000. Jesus is about to do a mass feeding, a large feeding. It tells us there was 5,000 men, so if they counted the men, you add the women, maybe some children there, it might have been well over 10,000 people. This story is so important to the tale of Jesus that it's told in all 4 gospel accounts. But it's in John's account that I read something that I never stopped and paused. It's this phrase found in John chapter 6, verse 10. It says, he had him sit down there because there was plenty of grass in that place. Plenty of grass. Why is that important? Why does God want you to know there's plenty of grass there? Is it because he wants you to know that it was a really comfortable place for them to sit down? No. Does God want you to know that it was really lush and attractive and beautiful and it was a pretty place to have a lunch? No. What I think might be happening here is John is purposely pointing out that there is plenty of grass there because it connects us to Psalm 23. It connects Jesus to Psalm 23. We're going through Psalm 23. I'm not doing it verse by verse. I'm actually doing it by themes. There's 6 themes that are mentioned there. The shepherd leads, the shepherd feeds, the shepherd corrects, the shepherd protects, the shepherd restores, and the shepherd rewards. Today we're in our second week. Last week we talked about a shepherd who was leading us. Today we're going to talk about a shepherd who feeds us. And so let's just jump right in with that verse 2. Verse 2 is the connection back to the feeding of the 5,000, or ahead. He makes me lie down in green pastures. Is that why in the feeding of the 5,000 God wanted you to know that there was plenty of grass there? Jesus had them sit down in an area that had plenty of grass, and here's a shepherd in Psalm 23 who makes us lie down in green pastures. Is that a strong connection? Oh, it is a very strong connection. There's several of them in Psalm 23. What has to happen for a sheep to lie down? Oh my goodness. Well, there has to be no threat. There has to be no wolves or anything in the area. He has to have, there can be no conflict within the flock. That's going to be important. There has to be no bugs or pestilence around them. That's going to be important. But the number one thing that a sheep needs in order to lie down is it needs to have a full belly. If a sheep is in a green pasture with plenty of grass, and his belly isn't full, he's not going to lie down. He's going to be up and he's going to be eating. The fact that in this psalm, it talks about that he makes me lie down in green pastures, talks about that you and I have had our feeding. The shepherd has seen to it that the food has been provided in our life. This is a theme of provision. Oh, but it's so much more. The point of making a sheep lie down is so that that sheep will get its rest. God is very concerned and interested in you and I getting our rest. What does it take for us to rest? Believe it or not, there are 2 creatures on this planet who do not rest well. One is a sheep, and the other one is a human. Dogs doze all day long. Cats take cat naps. Bears hibernate for a long period of time. Almost all other creatures on this planet have a period of rest. 2 creatures that do not, sheep and humans. In fact, rest was so important to God that he commanded it to you and I in the 10 Commandments. Which 10 commandment takes the most amount of words to explain? The commandment to thou shalt not murder? Nope. Thou shalt not steal? Nope. Thou shalt not lie? No. You only have one God. You must worship him only? Nope. The commandment that requires the most amount of explanation is the commandment that says, remember the Sabbath, keep it holy. 6 days a week you shall work, and on the 7th you shall rest. And then it goes on and on and on and on, explaining what rest looks like. I understand from physicians that our bodies, our systems inside of our bodies, work best when it receives an every 7th day of rest. Your whole makeup, your emotions will be better. Your physical body will be better if you can learn to just shut it down occasionally. But that's the problem, isn't it? I pulled up in my driveway, and just as I was pulling into my driveway, my phone went off, and I have my phone turned real loud. I looked down, and I saw it was my son. I wanted to take that phone call, but I was rushing a little bit. I was grabbing my laptop, grabbing my jacket, grabbing my trash from lunch, and I grabbed that phone and answered it all at the same time. And then I walked into the house talking to my son, and after a long conversation, Bonnie said, dinner's ready, and I sat down and had dinner with my wife, and it was way after that. She said, it's a nice evening, let's go for a walk. Okay, let's go for a walk. We stepped outside the front door, and she immediately noticed that my car was still running. I had left my car running. That car is representative of what I can do in my life when I don't shut it down enough. I mean, there's so much noise in this world, and everything can become so hectic so fast that I don't just shut it down and rest. And inside this psalm, there is a shepherd that He's responsible for the provisions in my life, and He has done such an amazing job of feeding the sheep that they can lie down and they can rest. Every day when you begin your day with this psalm and you say, "The Lord is my shepherd today," that helps us in fighting all of the things that can come at us that can stress us out. And I am stressed right now. I'm not, this isn't a poor Ron moment, but just so you understand, every pastor, all my minister friends that I've talked with, this is such a stressful time to lead the church. You know, the church has been emptied out. Look around you. This is the service that usually is the most full. And now here we are trying to rebuild and get the church back. It's such a stressful time. I got a phone call on a Friday that told me, "You're putting too much stress on people to come back to church." What? I'm not trying to stress anyone. Yes, you are. You're putting too much stress. You're constantly announcing all the reopenings of youth and children. Well, I have to announce that. That phone call came in on Friday. "You're putting too much stress on us." Phone call came in on Saturday. "Pastor Ron, I'm seeing our people all over town. They're in restaurants, they're in Walmart. You need to put more pressure on them to get back to church." I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. You know, too much pressure, not enough pressure. I mean, and all of that can just start building stress. And I need to just shut it down. You need to shut it down once in a while and say, "You know what? It's not my job to run the world. It's not my job to build the church. All of this belongs to Him. It's His job. I need to just do what I can do today." And in your lives, to just pick up on that day of rest. God, not because He needed it, but wanted to be an example to you and I. In 6 days He created everything, but on the seventh day He rested. And you can rest knowing that your shepherd has everything under control. Another feeding example inside this is in verse 5, where it talks about, "You prepare a table before me." I know it's going to talk about enemies, and we're going to talk about that in a couple weeks, but He's preparing a table. This shepherd was out in the field providing. Now he has moved indoors. He's a host. He's got this table that He invites us to. In the New Testament, whenever Jesus is telling a parable, if it has anything to do with a meal or a banquet or a wedding, the table represents that you have a right relationship with the groom. It's actually representative of salvation. This table that He has prepared for me, He has done so even though there's enemies knocking at the door. You and I probably have some enemies that have been knocking at our doors. What's just outside your door trying to get into your life right now? Come on. You can just feel it knocking. Worry, fear maybe during this whole COVID time. Frustration is anger starting to build. It's the one thing that psychologists and psychiatrists are starting to identify more and more during this COVID time is the anger that we're experiencing over this. We are just angry about this. And those things just come and they just knock at the door. Then sleepless nights. Before too long, depression is knocking. And here's a shepherd who is keeping those enemies at bay and still preparing this table for you right in front of you. And catch this, it does not matter how bad you've been. You're welcome to this table. For example, the Apostle Peter, who told Jesus, "I will never leave you. I will never abandon you. I will never deny you. I will die with you." And Jesus said, "Oh, Peter, before the rooster crows 3 times, you will have denied me 3 times. And then sure enough, Jesus is arrested. Peter is standing in a crowd of Jesus' enemies, and Peter allows himself to be numbered with them. Peter is numbered with the enemies of Jesus. You knew him. I do not know him. You're one of his followers. I do not know him. Surely you have to be one of his disciples. I do not know the man. And then the rooster crows. Now it's days later. Peter and the other disciples are fishing. 100 yards away on shore, there's the figure of a man who's yelling out at him, "Have you caught anything?" "Nope." "Cast your net again." They cast their net again. They have a miracle catch of fish. They pull it up into the boat. Now Peter is knee-deep in silver fish all around him. And he looks over to the shore and he goes, "It's the Lord." Peter can't wait for the boat to row in. He jumps over the side and swims back to Jesus. And when he swims back and he walks up on shore, what does he discover? Jesus has prepared breakfast. And he tells Peter, "Come." Wait a minute. Peter, you were just numbered with the enemies of Jesus, and here's this table that's prepared right in the presence of his enemies, and he invites you to come and eat. And the same thing is true of you and I. This is a shepherd who feeds. He invites us to come to his table. Oh, but there's much more here. Also in verse 5 is this little phrase, 3 little words, "My cup overflows." This may be one of my new favorite parts of Psalm 23. Dr. Mangano, this might become some of my favorite wording in all of the Old Testament, these 3 words, "My cup overflows," because of what I've recently learned. All this time when I've said my cup overflows, I've just always equated it with blessing. You know, he's providing, he's taking care of me. Oh, no. According to Skip Heitzig, he says that this cup overflowing is a king tables moment. When a king would invite you to the palace for a meal, say it was a party and stuff, everyone would sit down and he'd be at the head of the table and he would direct the servants to fill your cups. And all night long, he would keep directing the servants to fill your cup. And as long as your cup was full at the king's table, it meant he was enjoying the evening, he was enjoying the party. If at any point he cut off the wine and your cup started to get close to empty, it meant it's time to wrap it up. The night is late, the king is tired, it's time for us to go. And so you would know how long you were allowed to stay based on monitoring that cup. If the king himself directed a servant to bring a pitcher of wine over to his table, and he picked it up, and he poured it into your cup and would pour it to where it literally overflowed the top and left a spill on the table. It was symbolic to the entire wedding party that you had found special favor in his eyes and that he was so enjoying your company that he didn't want it to end. Remember, Psalm 23 is written by King David. He would have known about an overflowing cup. And when he's talking about this shepherd that feeds us and provides and takes care of us like sheep, we can rest and be like a table with enemies just outside the door, you can eat. But then there's this moment of this unbelievable, it's more than an invitation. It is the greatest of all compliments. The Lord wants to hang out with you all. I'm shocked too. I know you guys. He wants to hang out. He wants to spend more time. How much time does the king want to spend with you and I? And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. This psalm is so rich. There's so many hidden little parts inside of it. It is just becoming more and more comforting, and it allows me to rest at night. I begin my day now with these words: "The Lord is my shepherd." I end my night with, "And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." I don't have to worry about these things. I have a shepherd who is feeding me and taking care of me. Today, this shepherd is still feeding us. He's wanting us at his table. Yeah, it's the greatest of all invitations, but it's also the greatest of all compliments. Come, we'll sit and eat and drink together, and you will drink till you are full. It was as a child, this is how I heard this story. Ponce de Leon wanted to find the fountain of youth. Now, today, I'm not so sure that's even good history anymore, but back then when I was a kid, he was looking for the fountain of youth, and it was just such an inspiring story. That the fountain of youth has found its way into several movies. There's a Pirates of the Caribbean version that has to do with the fountain of youth, and Indiana Jones that with the cup of Christ, and you drink from it, you have life that just doesn't end. And there's this poor soldier sitting there who's 700 years old, and it's just, there's something about, I want to live forever. I want to have a drink of something that will just take care of me forever. And Ponce de Leon was so driven by that, he drove his men on these suicide missions, and it helped him to discover Florida. He's the one who's credited with discovering Florida. But later on, we know he never did find the fountain of youth, because in 1521 he dies from a poisonous arrow by one of the natives. The arrowhead was made of fish bone, and it infected his leg, and he died from it. Never did find the fountain of youth. You and I have access to the fountain of youth. But in order to identify with it, in order to get connected to Christ correctly, you have to acknowledge there's a thirst that you can't quench on your own. There's a thirst in us that only He can quench. Psalm 42 talks about, as the deer pants for water, so my soul is panting for you. There's something deep inside of us that wants to drink of God. And when you don't acknowledge that your soul is dry, then you're not going to ask for that drink. What is the drink? Well, it ends up being Jesus Christ. That's a strong connection to Psalm 23 also. But Jesus, to the woman at the well, give me a drink. How is it that you're asking me for a drink? I'm a Samaritan, you're a Jew. Jesus often crossed those racial barriers and built bridges there. He said, well, if you would have known who asked you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he'd have given you living water, and you would have never thirst again. And the woman's response is, give me that drink. Later on in John chapter 6, Jesus will say, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. And of course, that hunger and thirst is talking about a spiritual soul thirst. As I'm talking right now, your soul is starving. Your soul is thirsting for something that only the Lord can give you. And if you would just connect yourself to this shepherd, you would be quenched forever. As a boy, my parents, occasionally we'd go to a restaurant, but I wasn't allowed to have any soda, just water. You know, I'm looking around, everybody else has soda, I wanted soda. You're not allowed to have soda, just water. Part of it was because my parents were older, part of it was because my parents were poor. Part of it was because my parents were stingy. No, I'm just making that up. But anyway, just just water. And then the day came, we stepped in a restaurant, and they said, hey, by the way, we have free refills now. Free refills. You can drink all you want. I looked at my dad, and he's like, all right, you can have a soda. I'll have a soda. And then another, and then another. I drank so much, I was so sick that night. I just kept drinking and drinking. That poor waitress going back and forth, bringing it. Oh. There is this invitation to free refills with Jesus Christ. That sounded weak. Let me say it a different way. There is a shepherd that provides and provides and provides. And all you have to do is say these words, the Lord is my shepherd. No one else is my shepherd. No other voice gets my attention, just him. And when the Lord is my shepherd, I can rest. When the Lord is my shepherd, I don't have to worry about providing for my table. When the Lord is my shepherd, I have a cup that just overflows. He wants to spend time with me. And then one day, we will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.